Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. Today, I'd like to give you a little bit more information about how Notify works and familiarize yourself with the process of how we manage budgeting, bidding, tracking, and invoicing jobs. We'll be running another webinar shortly, which will give you a little bit more information on how the accounting end of everything works. We'll also be sending out a follow-up after this with just some more information on the program. I also wanted to note that as we're going through this, we have contractors that can get into Notify in any of these 4 steps. So you're not required to go through each of these. We have people that only use Notify for job costing, only use us for bidding, and only use us for invoicing. So keep in mind that there's no wrong way to use the platform as we go through this. If you have any questions, I'm happy to open up Q&A at the end to answer your questions about Notify. You can also reach out to us so that we can set up a live training if you're interested in learning more. I'm going to actually demo how all of this works for you, but first I'd just like to give you a little background on everything that we'll cover today. So we can use Notify as an estimating tool for any of our jobs here. This will let us put in costs for labor and materials, so that this way when we track our actual cost against jobs, we'll be able to get a good reference of exactly where we stand at any given time. We can do this by either getting very detailed and bringing in specific items and estimating their quantities, as well as estimating specific employees and the amount of hours we anticipate them to work. We can also just keep this very basic and just put in a lump sum amount for materials, labor, and subcontractor budget so that we can quickly get our estimated costs in there and reference those numbers as we track everything in real time. Now, in the bidding stage, this is everything client-facing, where we'll be able to create our contract, determine how much we want the contract to be worth, as well as customize how we want our proposal to look. You'll have the option of sending out each of these proposals via email from Notify for a digital e-signature by the client. You'll be able to actually start from this step based on how you initiate the job and just begin by quoting the client, so to speak. Otherwise, if you use the budgeting tools in our previous step, you'll be able to mark up your cost. Now, once the job is live, you'll be able to track everything in the same section where you would create your budget. This will allow us to give you a good idea of exactly where we stand with regards to our budget, how much our cost is to date, and just real-time progress here. And lastly, we'll cover invoicing, where we can set up progress billing. We can do this based on a percentage of completion or by putting in a dollar amount. We keep track of what was previously invoiced and paid towards the job so that you can easily manage this. We'll also be able to manage change orders and invoice for them accordingly. So here's a look at Notify when you would first log in. This is our overview screen, and this should give you a good idea of all the jobs that are open, your average profitability on all of your jobs, as well as anything that's outstanding. We'll also be able to get a brief look at our scheduling for the day and take a look at any of the comments left in our activity feed. The contract jobs table is what we commonly refer to as the beating heart of Notify. This is where you're able to manage and create new jobs. We give you real-time status updates just depending on which phase of the job that you're in. We also give you a brief look at your analytics for each job, profitability, cost, and your revenue to this point. We'll also come into this section here whenever we're going to create a new job. So once you're creating a new job and we choose our client and give this one a job name here, we're prompted to choose from a number of different contract styles that we offer. Our most commonly used is our owner contract, which we recommend for residential work. However, we do support work in the GC bid, where there will be AIA requisitions for retention, as well as maintenance contracts and time materials work. Again, I mentioned that there is no wrong way to use Notify, but feel free to find the best process that works for you and your client. Once we choose our contract type, we're prompted for the job costing style. And in Notify, this is really just a way to control the flow of the job. You'll have the option of keeping things basic, as well as getting more detailed. And again, there's no wrong way to do this. This is where we're actually going to be budgeting for the projects. You'll be able to put in your estimated costs, really structure the job, and use that information when you're bidding on the job. In the simple or advanced modes, as I mentioned earlier, you're able to start off right by quoting the client and creating that proposal. This would bypass the budgeting step. And again, whatever you feel more comfortable with or your client wishes to use. The difference between the simple and advanced modes is, for advanced mode, when you put in your line items on your contract, Notify will create a corresponding job phase in order for you to be able to track labor and materials for that. In simple mode, regardless of how many line items are on your contract, will ultimately point everything to one job phase titled labor and materials. Again, no wrong way to use this here. I'll go ahead and show you how professional mode works, just so we can get a better idea of how the budgeting. We can also include some additional information here. All of this is optional, but we run a number of different job reports in Notify. So the more information you put in here, obviously the more detailed we'll make those reports. You can set a job site address so that if we have employees that are going to be checking in and checking out for work, we can reference their location with respect to this job site address here. Now you'll notice that we're going to start off here in this plan and track section. This is ultimately going to be the home of our job costing. Everything in this section is going to be tracked internally only. The client will never see any of this information. Now at this point, everything that I put in as far as cost and numbers is all going to be for my budget. Once the job is live, or if we chose one of the other job costing styles, this section would specifically be used to track our actual cost. You'll notice that we can bring in a previous jobs plan, and this is just a tool in Notify to make things easier and expedite the process of creating new jobs. You can save any project plan that you create here as a template. So if you have jobs that are similar in scope, you can easily bring in a previous jobs template and make modifications to that instead of starting from scratch. The way we'll structure these is by adding job phases here. Now, a job phase can represent a specific aspect of work that you wish to track, and can also be used as a way to structure the project. We'll be able to set up dates for each of these job phases, and we'll also track the cost individually for each phase, as well as totaling everything up at the top of the screen for you. This way, if I have a job phase called Rough-In, for example, and I want to track the labor and materials specifically for this phase, I'll be able to keep track of that here while having this total to the ultimate job cost. Now, when you're estimating and budgeting for this job here and setting up this job phase, you'll have the option of either going ahead and adding a lump sum amount or adding specific materials, itemizing your budget that way, and adding employees. When you add materials, we'll bring these in from the catalog in Notify. Notify's catalogs is a section to use when you're storing all of your products and service information, your default cost for each, and any other additional details for each of those products and services. Keep in mind that part of our sync with QuickBooks Online is that we automatically pull in any products and services that you have from QuickBooks and populate the catalog with them. So at this point, if I want to start typing in my items here, you'll see that we automatically refine your search result based on products that are in this catalog. You can also add a new item on the go by clicking Add New here. This will allow us to estimate the actual quantity of what we need rather than just putting in a lump sum amount. Another benefit to this is that once the job goes live, we'll be able to take our budgeted list and turn this into a purchase order directly. Now, the same can be said about our labor. We can either put in a lump sum amount up here, or you can add specific roles from your company or specific employees and estimate their amount of hours to get our labor budget. You'll see that we have a drop-down menu here that gives you a list of all of your employees in the company. We'll be able to choose the employee, and the default rate that you have set up in your account will automatically be imported in. This is something that will be your loaded labor burden, and you can set up in our rate section to include any additional parameters such as tax amount, workers' comp, or anything relevant of that sort. Keep in mind also that the labor burden here should not include the markup. This is something that will be added in the next step when we're bidding for the job. Now, the other option here is maybe if, for example, we're not sure who is available at this point, we can always schedule a specific role within the company. You'll notice that Eric's role is in parentheses here next to his name. You'll be able to set up roles automatically for your company and be able to place different employees within each role. This way, you can choose the role itself instead of an employee and take the average cost of every employee set up under that role. This will give us a good idea of how much this will cost based on the amount of hours we're estimating. And then we can always go ahead and schedule our employees after the job is live. So I'll add a couple more phases here just to make this project a little more well-rounded. And just to give you an idea, we'll be able to bring in specific services from your catalog when you're adding these job phases. And you can go ahead and just put in a lump sum amount for the materials budget as well as the labor budget. This way, you can easily reference your estimated costs when you start tracking the actual cost later in the job. Now, everything that we budgeted within these job phases is totaling up at the top, so I have a good idea of my total budget for the project, as well as broken out by materials, labor, and if applicable, any of the subcontractors. Now, when we click on Create Proposal here, this will give us the option to take any of those job phases that we set up and import them into the contract. This will allow us to perform a markup percentage on any of those estimated costs, as well as bringing any of the information in that we may have put into those job phases. You'll always have the option to disregard those plan phases and just add your line items manually. So now that we're in the proposal section, this will allow us to start bidding on the project. We can put in some information about the client here. Any of this information can be imported onto the document. I will note that all of our proposal documents we offer as a complimentary service to be able to customize them for you, so we can include any of the information needed, any relevant terms and conditions or verbiage, as well as hide any of the information that's not relevant. Now you'll see I have line items now corresponding to each one of my job phases, and we have the cost showing up whatever I budgeted in the previous step. I'll be able to apply a markup percentage to materials and labor individually for each one of these contract line items. We can also use this lightning bolt icon to perform a quick markup. So if I want to mark up the entire project by a certain amount, or just for materials or labor only, this is a quick way for me to do so. We can always use these markup percentages here as a basis, and then round up or down accordingly. Now you can also include an additional information here because everything here is going to be client facing. This is how we're going to track the revenue for the job. So ultimately we're going to be invoicing for each of these line items here. So at this point, while we're bidding on the job, we're able to customize how we want this proposal document to look. As I mentioned, you'll be able to send this out for a digital e-signature to the client via email, which lets them view the proposal and choose to accept or reject it online. Notify will automatically update the status of the job based on what option they choose. Some of the customization that you have here is you can enter details as a description of services for any of the line items here. Anything that you enter here will show up underneath the line item on the document, as well as importing a breakdown or bill of materials. This is just another way to customize what you want to display here. And as a quick way to do this, you can even bring in any of the items that were budgeted or any of the labor hours that were budgeted in the previous step. This would allow you to individually apply a markup here while having more control over what you want each individual item to cost, or at least be displayed to the client. Note also that we'll never display the markup percentage itself to the client. Everything in this gray box here is not going to be shown on the document. You'll be able to set up terms and conditions for all of your projects as well. This is something that can be customized in the administrative section where you can customize your terms and conditions, your default text for emails that go out through Notify, and things like that just to expedite this whole process. And just to give you an idea of what our stock template would look like for these proposals, this will include all of the information here that we entered. So if there were any description or any bill of materials listed, you always have the option of keeping things basic as just showing the line item and its cost. We'll include some general job information, plus anything that you may have added in the top step. And again, I remind you that this is something that we can customize on our end. We've done it a lot of times in the past, and we have some really neat layouts that we can use for you. Now we'll include the signature lines on all of the proposals here because you have a few different options of moving forward in this regard. At any point, you can download a preview of this in a PDF form and be able to print it out for reference or send it out in another way. You'll also be able to use Notify for the digital e-signature. And as I mentioned before, we'll send an email out to the client. You'll be able to customize your email message here. And most importantly, we'll include a link that will take the client to view this proposal in the DocuSign page and allow them to sign their name digitally by accepting this proposal. The other option that we have is we can always just manually make this active. There's another way of authenticating the work here, or if we have them sign it in person, and this will just give us the same results as if the client actually did go ahead and sign that proposal. Now that the contract is active, it makes our entire job active here. So we can now start tracking our costs and invoicing accordingly. Anything that we've marked up or manually entered here is ultimately we're going to wind up invoicing for it later. So now in the tracking section, which is, as you can see, the same place that we created our estimate, We'll include an additional line here to show you your cost to date. These numbers will automatically update whenever any labor entries are entered or any material purchases are pointed at this job. This way, at any given time, you can come into this section and get a good look at exactly where you stand with respect to what you budgeted. As I mentioned earlier, this is something that can be done on a phase level as well. You'll be able to get the breakdown between what was estimated as well as what's been costed so far for each individual job phase. Now we can take the budgeted list of materials here and directly turn them into a purchase order. Once we click Order Materials, we're given the option to choose which items we want to include, and by clicking Start PO Process, Notify will take me directly from the job and automatically bring me into this Purchases section here. This PO will automatically be started by including the items and the budgeted amounts, as well as having the job selected. So if there were any changes here as far as what we wound up ordering with respect to what we were going to budget, this will automatically show as a materials cost on this job. Keep in mind also, this is not the only way to create material purchases in Notify. You'll be able to come into the Purchases section where you'll normally manage any of your active purchases, but you can always create one from scratch. Purchases can also be uploaded from our mobile application from the fields, which allow you to have the same functionality of pointing the purchase at a specific job phase, as well as putting in the quantities in each individual line item here. Once we choose a vendor, we'll have enough information to submit this PO. There is some additional and optional information that we can include here. By default, we'll automatically set up a PO number here, but you can always manually override this. Notify will let us verify if this PO has already been used, so that if we were to create a bill against this PO number, we won't have any kind of conflict. The payment method is also important when keeping in mind our sync with QuickBooks Online. By default, and if you don't choose an option here, we'll treat this as a vendor will invoice in the case of we're going to submit this purchase order as a committed cost, and the vendor is actually going to send us a bill for this later. This will keep the PO open and wait for us to create one of those bills in Notify in order to resolve this specific open PO. We'll also have the option here, as well as from the field, to mark that it was paid with cash or a debit card. This will treat this automatically as an expense and sync it over to QuickBooks as soon as we submit this, without requiring a bill. And once we submit the purchase order, we'll be brought to our active POs and be able to easily navigate to this PO number. You'll see that we give you the option to print or email this to the vendor itself, but you'll be able to do this at a later point as well by just coming in and viewing the details of this particular purchase. Some of the options that we have here is to mark items as received, so you'll be able to keep track of what was ordered, what was actually shipped, and what we ultimately wound up receiving. You'll also be able to email this out to your vendor, and here you'll be able to include some additional information as far as comments. You'll be able to include some shipping information if necessary, as well as be able to attach other documents here as well. And just to give you an idea, each of these purchase order templates is something that we can customize for you as well. This would be our stock template, and without any customization, keep in mind in that last screen, you're able to customize and put in some instructions as well as hide prices and change the billing address if needed. Now coming back on the job level, you can see that my progress is updated to reflect this purchase order that we placed. This will include exactly what was ordered against what we budgeted and give me an idea of exactly where I stand with respect to my materials cost. Now I'm also going to submit some hours here for my laborers just to kind of give you an idea of how we automatically update this. But for this labor cost to go up, we'll require that the employees actually enter their time, whether it's through our mobile application on their own, or someone in the office or foreman submits their time for them. All of this would take place in our time tracker section. So you can see up top that there are several different ways we can do this. From the office side, we can either come into the enter time section here and actually pull up an employee and fill out their week as if this was a normal time card. Another form of manual entry is we can come into the foreman view here, and instead of searching by employee, we can pull up a specific job. This will give us a list of all of our employees so we can easily put in the amount of hours for multiple people at once. In our check-in and out view, this is where we'll manage any of the entries logged from our mobile application. And just to kind of give you an idea of some of the information we show you here is the employee's name, the job and the job phase they checked in for, and we show you if they were on-site or off-site when they did log these entries. This is where setting that job site address comes into play here. But most importantly, we'll keep a timestamp of when they were in and out and total up all their hours to be used as part of the labor cost of this job. So now when we come to the plan and track section, you can see that I now have a labor cost with respect to the hours that I entered. This is something that will automatically update here, however we choose to actually enter these hours, whether the employee logs the hours from the field, whether we log the hours from the office, or whether the hours are logged from a foreman who's tracking another employee's time. This is something that does not need to be kept on top of. It's something that's going to update automatically. So you can come here and see this cost be accurately depicted with how many hours have been logged so far. So back in the contract section here, this is where we're going to actually wind up invoicing and managing the value of what we have our contract. At this point, the value includes anything that we put on the proposal, including the marked up prices and anything we may have added, but you'll also be able to add change orders as much as needed here. When you add a change order, it's similar to the same process of adding a new line item or customizing a new line item rather. In the change order, you'll be able to actually send out each change order for a digital e-signature as well. So we'll populate a separate document for this, and this is something you can email to the client and have them actually the same vein as the proposal, accept or reject the change order. Change orders can also manually be made active so that this will now become a billable line item that we can invoice for. Before we jump into the invoicing, I also wanted to show you in this documents and RFI section, as a cloud-based software, we don't limit you on what you can put into here. You'll be able to upload any kind of supporting documents, images, anything like that that you want to associate with this job. And by default, Notify will populate this section with any of the signed requests that have gone out so far, including a signed copy of the proposal and any change orders. So now when we come into invoice for this job, Notify will give us a list of all the line items here and give us the option to put in a percentage complete as well as putting in a dollar value. This will allow us to keep track of what's previously been invoiced so that we can come in and log these invoice draws at any given time. When you're creating your invoice here, you have some customization options as far as being able to edit the description here, edit the information that's going to go to QuickBooks as far as the payment terms and the invoice date. And we also double check QuickBooks to make sure that we're not duplicating any invoice numbers. Once you verify and finalize this invoice, this will just give us a brief overview of the information we entered and also give us the option to send this to QuickBooks and also send an email to the client. These are both actions that you'll be able to do at a later point. And you can see that the send to QuickBooks option is checked off automatically. And once we submit this invoice, we'll keep it on file as outstanding here. This will take into account any payments made here in Notify or in QuickBooks. So that this way, the bidirectional sync works so that you don't have to go into two different places in order to keep track of this invoice. Once it's created in Notify, we sync into QuickBooks, and any payments made in QuickBooks will automatically factor back into Notify, display for you down here, and update the balance up here. We can also email these invoices out directly to the client from Notify, be able to customize your own invoice email here, include any additional attachments, and just to give you an idea of what our stock template looks like for the invoices. Again, as with the proposals and the POs, we can always customize these documents for you. Now, back at the job level, if I come into my summary tab here, I'll see that the numbers are automatically updating to factor in any of the information that we just entered. Whether it's the invoices here, we keep track of anything that was also paid, and factor in any of the costs. This way you can get your profit margin percentage, your actual profit, and be able to keep track of all this information in real time. So it's important to note in the contract section, see the total amount that's contracted out, what's been invoiced for so far, whether it's for the total job or for a line item basis here. And also be able to keep track of what's been paid towards the job. Lastly, I'd like to give you an idea of some of the reports we can run based on this information. In our plan and track section here, where we're keeping track of all of our costs, when you enter the budget and the cost to date, we have a lot of different ways to keep track of your progress, including being able to see your percentage complete. So at any given time, you'll be able to run a project report here, which will ultimately give you a detailed printout of what you see here. If you've entered a budget, this will include the percentage complete for the entire job, as well as for each individual job phase here. This is also a useful report to run when you want to see all of your costs laid out and exactly where you stand at any given time in the job. Obviously, this report will automatically update here based on any of the new information that's submitted since the last time you ran it. Now, we have a number of other reports as well, but there's one specifically I'd like to show you, and that is our advanced jobs report. So this will include information across all of your jobs, all of the financial information ranging from the actual contract amount to the cost of the job, what's been invoiced, and the overall percentage complete and profit percentage. You can see that we'll separate everything based on the status of the job itself, and include all the information here accordingly. You'll also notice that we automatically export this report to an Excel sheet. So if any kind of additional information is needed, or you need to modify any of the information, you can always come in here and put in your own formulas, or kind of enter everything as you need. So we'll break out the revenue here based on what's been invoiced. We'll calculate any kind of retention here for those AIA style invoices. We'll also give you a breakdown of your cost here, totaling everything up between your labor, material, and subcontractors, showing you what was budgeted initially, what's been costed to date, and the remaining amount based on those numbers. At the end of the report, we'll also show you the profit amount and the profit percentage. So that's basically the essentials when it comes to budgeting, bidding, tracking, and invoicing for the jobs. As I mentioned before, there are ways where you can come in here and just bid on jobs, just track jobs as far as their costs are concerned, or just come in and use us for the progress billing. We have contractors that use us in a multitude of different ways, and we support a pretty diverse group of clients. We can always recommend as well just to kind of start slow and grow from there. So using these simple or advanced job costing styles is never a wrong move in Notify.